Hi, and welcome to the second grade sixth weeks curriculum preview for science. Today we're going to briefly talk about organisms and the grassland biome. So as always, we are going to start off by using some key planning documents. So if you don't have these handy, you might want to pause the video and go ahead and get those, or get those after the presentation is over. We talked about this last 6 weeks, so I'll just briefly touch on this. This is an infographic that should be hanging up in your science lab, and it really just kind of helps everybody know what everyone is studying as far as biomes go in the fifth and the sixth 6 weeks. So um, first grade is currently doing deserts in the six weeks, and then of course second grade has moved on to the grasslands, and then third grade is going more in depth into the rainforest, and then fourth grade is going in depth into aquatic systems, specifically wetlands. Um, just wanted to give a little shout out to Ann Loopold. Thank you so much from Stowe Elementary. She emailed me the other day, and was out visiting with them at their campus, and she sent me this image of some things that she found at the dollar store that she just found in the last couple of weeks. So just wanted to pass that along. They had some little die cut shapes for Arctic animals, it looks like, and then some little games there for life sciences. So if you're in the dollar store, and you might want to check them out. Thanks again, Ann. Okay, so before we go on, I just want to address a question that I've gotten from a couple of teachers regarding grasslands. And some teachers have been noticing in the resources that I've been putting in more and more prairie resources for grasslands. And so the question has come up, well, which grasslands should we be using with our students? And the short answer to that is all of them and any of them. We're really introducing the concept of a grassland to students, so it makes sense to start with a very broad definition of what a grassland is. And then move over to talking about maybe some of the particular types of grasslands in the world. That's not a huge key concept. Remember, the big goal is for us to look at our current life science standards through the lens of what that looks like in a grassland. And so that could be a prairie, or it could be the steppe, or any of those that you see over in that little graphic that we have there too. The reason I've been increasing the prairie resources is because, of course, the prairie is our North American grassland, and we have some remnants of those here in Texas. In fact, the Blackland Prairie is the most um, endangered biome habitat in the world, even more so than the rainforest when you look at the percentage of what's left. So it makes a lot of sense for us to talk about what's kind of in our own backyard. But really, you can open it up to any. I just would probably encourage you not to just focus on one particular type of grassland, kind of mix it up. There's a website down there at the bottom of the screen, and I'll link that back in Canvas. And it's really got a nice little overview of different types of grasslands, so that might be helpful for you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we covered last 6 weeks with the tundra, and then what is going to be covered in the grassland biome this time. So we do have some overlapping and recurring content standards from the fifth 6 weeks as well as the sixth 6 weeks, but I just want to make sure you are aware that we have two concepts that are brand new this 6 weeks that we didn't touch on when we talked about the tundra, and that would be things that don't make really a lot of sense when you talk about the tundra, and that's plant characteristics and then life cycles of insects. So you may have talked about those somewhat briefly in tundra, but this is going to be a chance for us to linger longer on those particular two standards since we haven't had those before. So you can see here we've got a screenshot of the two pacing guides. Just like we had last 6 weeks, we have two different options for organizing our unit for the last 6 weeks. And you'll see that those new concepts are highlighted right here just to remind you of those two new things that we didn't talk about last 6 weeks. If you go with option one, that basically takes one content standard for anywhere from 7 to 3 days, and you go through the 5E model within that either 7 days or 3 days, and you'll notice that these two new content standards have longer days scheduled for them, which makes sense because we haven't had those before. As you get into the elaborate stage within that 5E arc, you'll talk about what that looks like within the grassland. And so basically every standard you talk about, you introduce it generally, and then you take a look at it in the grassland. The alternative option that you can do is to compact all of the content standards within about 4 weeks, and that opens up a 2-week unit of study for doing an in-depth project for the grassland. So I've talked to many teachers and they really like having the option of choosing either or. And some teachers are using the same option in the 5th 6 weeks and the 6th 6 weeks, and some are mixing it up, trying one option 1 6 weeks and one option another 6 weeks. Option 2 is really nice for this 6 weeks because of the ELAR connection with the research project. Okay, so this is very similar to what I did last 6 weeks too. We have a screenshot there of the district calendar, and I've outlined the days for the 6 weeks there. I'm not counting that last week as obviously anything for instruction since there's so much going on. But if you're going with option 1, just a reminder that when you begin in the engage, explore, and explain, you're just going to use a variety of biomes and environments, whatever's in STEM scopes and aims. And then when you get to the elaborate, you'll focus on the grasslands. So you can kind of see that icon there. And then be sure that your evaluation is not only on the grasslands, but a variety of biomes. And this is a little bit more in-depth example. I just went through the unit overview, and this is what we have bundled 2.9a and 2.10b together for 7 days. So I just went through the unit overview and picked some things that I thought would be particularly strong. This is going to be a plant focus. Remember, that's going to be the focus for our new view. And so I've pulled those resources that I identified in the unit overview that are really heavy on the plant and making sure that those are tightly aligned. So you can pause that and take a little bit more detailed look at that as you need. Before we leave the details about option 1, I just want to remind you as well that I've got guiding questions to help you connect your content standards with the grassland biome. So if we're talking about basic needs of plants, then I have a guiding question that I've created that your students can answer if they're looking at that in the grassland biome. So again, just wanted you to know that that's there for you. Okay, as I mentioned, option 2 is where you compact all of your content standards in weeks 1 through 4. So you can see that those would be roughly from April 17th through May 12th. And then that leaves you a 2-week window here to do a research project focused on the grasslands. This is a neat time of year because other grade levels, a lot of them are doing the research option this 6 weeks since it's a great connection with ELAR. And so it's neat to go down the hall and see their writing or dioramas or maybe even large displays in the hall. And kids can really get a good overview of all the different biomes going on in this school, which is really why we have that biome spiraled view. Okay, and again, this is just an example of how you might move through sequentially those content standards. If you're going to compact all of those standards into 4 weeks, this is how I'd recommend you doing that based on what has been covered already and what hasn't. And of course, you're welcome to edit this as you need, but this is just an example of something I thought might help you if you're going to go this route. Okay, as always, I know many of you rely heavily on the unit overviews, which is great. That's what they're for. So just want to remind you of a couple of places for you to look. Because we do have 2 new components this 6 weeks, I've got those highlighted here. So this kind of breaks down what you should be looking at when you're talking about those 2 new concepts with plants and then as well as insects. And then I've got those key concepts broken down here too. So just want to remind you about that. And then when you get into the resources by standard, just want to remind you too that I have scoured everything that's in STEM scopes and aims, EduSmart, and anytime I see a connection to the grassland, I'll always mention that in there so that you don't have to be looking for those connections. If we don't have a whole lot of connections with that particular standard and grasslands, I'll make sure that we've got some good things that are put under related resources. And then I've also got some big units in there that talk about grasslands also. So I've got that little grass icon there just to remind you that That's mentioned in the unit overview as you need it. So an example of a couple of things that are specific to the grassland, they're not related to a particular standard, so I put them underneath the unit overview. So when you click on the unit overview under related resources, there's some grassland lesson ideas, just kind of generally would go with lots of different standards. A Blackland Prairie poster, which is really neat. There's an Ames Exploring Environments, which talks about lots of different habitats, but it has a section on grasslands. And then there's a really neat image of how prairie grasses have a really deep and deep root system underground, and that's a neat adaptation for them to live on the prairie. So just wanted to let you know that those are there. Okay, as we kind of wrap up, I just want to mention a couple of things to you that I talked to principals about a couple of weeks ago. I did a presentation for your principal, and many of them had asked me to remind teachers of the usage of the science lab and how they might use that, how might you use that in the last couple of 6 weeks of school, and how that might relate to life science. So I've just got an image here of the elementary science tier 1 priorities, which I know a lot of you use in your PLCs, and just want to talk to you about how to make sure that we're hitting that 60% here for second grade of daily hands-on science instruction. So here's an example of a campus that I saw, and they were doing a plant unit, and they went into the science lab and had plenty of space there to open up and to kind of look at these plant parts as they start to dissect and look at the root systems and the stems and so forth. So if your students don't use the science lab on a regular basis through the year, this is a really great time to get them into the science lab, as it's not really being used as much by the upper grade levels. And so your students can understand how to move about in the lab space, what the lab space is for, safety procedures, how to use the stools. The stools you can sit upon them and do your lab, or you can push them under and stand and do your lab. So just some of those things as they get ready to go into the next grade level, where they're probably going to be using that lab a lot more. So in addition to using the lab for life science, of course, don't forget about going outside. There are many examples of flowering plants and all kinds of different plants and insects. You can find those in different stages. This is a great time right now to go out and find crane flies, which are those a lot of people call mosquito hawks, but they're flying all around. Ladybugs are out right now. Lots of things are budding. And so there's 2 pictures of some Birdville kiddos that were outside doing some life science, the kindergarten students underneath the tree, and then some 5th graders who found some ladybugs as they were heading in to their classroom one day. So I just want to remind you too, when we talk about hands-on in the life sciences, it might look a little bit different than what you might think. So I just highlighted some things that all these things would be things that would count as hands-on. So here, this is just from the overview. If they're doing research stations that relate to the biome, that would be a hands-on, because they're collecting information and they're doing something with that information. Here, this one has identifying animal body parts and their functions and then create an animal. So that's actually making a model of an animal showing their body parts and their functions. That counts as hands-on. So I just wanted to define that for you. Making models, collecting information, doing things with that information, a game that shows a relationship perhaps between in a food chain or something like that. Those all count as hands-on. They look a little different than they did maybe when we were doing matter and energy, but that's still what that means. Okay. Also just wanted to remind you how important it is to make sure that your students have experienced the 16 science tools that are listed in 2.4a, which is a process skill. If you haven't been able to use all of those tools this year, this is a great time. We've got a little bit of open time for science right now, and to maybe make a station where you put some of those tools into your rotation so the students can experience those. You can see how important it is if you look vertically, the jump between the number of tools that we use in second grade to third grade. So if we do a really great job in K1 and 2 of making sure students really know how to use a hand lens correctly and a primary balance and all of those tools that are listed for you, then when they get to third grade and they use more sophisticated tools like a maybe a triple beam balance and a microscope and so forth, they're going to be able to relate the basic tool to that more sophisticated tool. Speaking of tools for the 6 weeks, there are 3 tools that are specifically listed for this unit, and that's notebooks, terrariums, and aquariums as well, and then insect nets. And you have materials for a terrarium and aquarium actually in your science lab. There are plenty of seeds that the other grade levels have gotten this year, that they would have some extras left over for you, as well as options if you want to make an aquarium. There's resources there for you to do that as well, and insect nets also. If you're looking for any PD that really helps you get a better understanding of what the 5E looks like in each unit, or doing hands-on science either in the lab or outside or with your class, watch for those opportunities. I will have those in the summer PD catalog that'll be coming up, so be sure to look out for that. Okay, and then as we wrap up, I just have a couple of updates that I want to share with you from TEA. On the screen, you'll see a timeline of the plan that they had to streamline the science standards for K through 8 and then some high school courses. So we have a revision coming up, a complete overhaul of our standards coming up in a few years down the line. So this is kind of some pre-work that TEA wanted to do with the science standards beforehand, to look at ways that they could edit, delete, or clarify some of the science standards that may not be needed or just need a little tweaking as before we move into that revision a few years down the road. So where we are right now is the committee has made their final recommendations, and those are now open for public comment. And TEA should be voting to adopt those in some form, either in late April or early May. And so that's kind of where we are at the process. These will likely be changes that are implemented next school year. And so I've scheduled a session for 2nd grade teachers to really get an idea of all of the changes that have been made for your grade level on our district PD day. So I just wanted to let you know that that was coming up. If you're interested in seeing what those recommendations are, I've got those links back in Canvas. Okay, and then finally, I just want to mention that I've got a s'more back in Canvas as well, and it has a visual guide for some new life science materials that I've sent to your science lab, and they're ready for you to use, as well as lots of PD this summer. We live in a wonderful area of Texas where we have lots and lots of opportunities, so I've listed all of those and pull the s'more over. Right here, you can click to access all of the visual guides for field trips, as well as the things that are in your science lab. And then down at the bottom, there's all kinds of links for some PD that I think are valuable or might be something that you would be interested in attending. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. And as always, please let me know how I can support your science program. Have a wonderful last 6 weeks. Bye-bye.